How many of you know a farmer or are a farmer? When you picture a farmer, what do you see? When I asked in my audience analysis, when you picture a farmer, what do you see? I received similar responses. To summarize your responses, the majority of you described a hardworking individual who owns a big red barn and isn't very wealthy. The problem is, this stereotype doesn't exist anymore. Majority of large farmers in the United States today own large amounts of land, large amounts of animals, and are extremely wealthy. In his article from 2007, Brian Riedel mentions the average farm household earns $81,000 annually, which is 29% above the national average income. Well, where does this wealth come from? Well, it comes from the biggest source of corporate welfare in the United States, agricultural subsidies. The fight for reforming ag subsidies in the United States is an uphill battle to say the least. In Washington, lobbyists have a stranglehold of Congress in a variety of ways. Many riders advocate for major change, but rarely gain any traction towards change. Agricultural subsidies are a major problem, and they need significant reduction and reform in the United States economy. Brian Riedel again explains in his article how farm subsidies harm taxpayers, consumers, and farmers too. That government subsidies were developed in the 1930s as a temporary solution to deal with an emergency. The subsidies were designed to pull American farmers out of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, while also providing a stable food supply to the American economy. But now, 90 years later, subsidies are not about pulling people out of poverty, they're about large farmers making record incomes. In my audience analysis, I asked, who deserves federal compensation? Out of the 5 options, most of you selected below $65,000 of net income deserve federal compensation. This makes the most sense, as the lowest amounts of income should receive the most government aid to avoid poverty. However, as Riedel explains, farm subsidies are intended to alleviate farmer poverty, but the majority of subsidies go to commercial farms with net worths of nearly $2 million. John Friedland drives this point home in his article, Will Congress Allow U.S. Farmers to Fully Compete in World Markets? That 65% of all federal farm payments go directly to the top 16% of farmers. Why are the individuals at the top receiving the majority of subsidies? The richest farmers shouldn't be receiving the majority of federal aid that is designed to alleviate poverty. Now that we see why ag subsidies are a problem, let's look at the causes. And looking at a political cartoon, you can see big agribusiness taking over small family farms. Across the country, corporate ag businesses taking over family farms and also making it difficult for small farmers to enter the market. America is fat. It isn't a secret that many of us are obese and unhealthy. The 3 highest causes of death in the United States are stroke, heart disease, and cancer, which are all food-related illnesses. What does the U.S. government do in response? Well, they subsidize refined grains, unhealthy fats and oils, and most importantly, sugar. Jose Alvarez writes in Sweetening the U.S. Legislature, the remarkable success of the U.S. sugar lobby, that the United States sugar policy has been affected by statute since 1789. From colonial times to the 1930s, sugar was a free market item, received no government aid, and dealt specifically with cane and beet sugar. After the Great Depression, the federal government began handing out subsidies as a price guarantee onto sugar. They started dealing with corn sweeteners, and along with the development of corn sweeteners came the infamous high fructose corn syrup, which is one of the most harmful things in foods today. You can see this, all these items on my slideshow here have high fructose corn syrup and unhealthy fats and oils. High fructose corn syrup is a cheaper alternative to other sweeteners, but it also promotes corn overproduction. While not only making Americans fat, subsidies promote corn overproduction for American farmers. And without opening another can of worms, the ethanol industry is a big problem as well. Taking a step back, let's dive into some more statistics. In the Chicago Tribune article, we have to rethink farm subsidies before they do more damage. The author states that the USDA expects to make $28 billion in direct farm payments to farmers. Well, where is this $28 billion going each year? Well, it's going to that top 16% of farmers. And this top 16% are funding foods that are going to the American consumer and destroying our health. The subsidies are not going to small farmers, but they're going to the largest corporate farmers across the United States. Most importantly, the money flows to lobbyists and politicians in Washington. How can we begin to solve these problems that are so connected? So you see here, this is over a 3-year period. So this is the subsidy total for a 3-year period, from 2008 to 2010. $3.5 billion are going to 884 recipients of corn subsidies. If you don't understand what that is, that's millions of dollars to 884 people, versus like the CRP program, which is also heavily debated because it takes land out of circulation, is going to almost 500,000 individuals, and it's almost half of corn subsidies. So you can see that sugar is being heavily regulated through high fructose corn syrup. Well, if you want to read this, you can, but it's just a side piece. My personal solution to ag subsidies is to cut funding over a 10-year period. We start with that $28 billion going to ag programs each year, and we cut it to $8 billion over a 10-year time slot. Now, $20 billion seems like a lot, but it's enough money to continue federal crop insurance at the current rate, maintain maintain food prices, and guarantee no loss for American farmers, barring, say, the Dust Bowl or a drought that would destroy half of America. The big thing is it cuts direct farm payments out to American farmers. And without getting too detailed, a direct farm payment is something, hey, that the federal government says, hey, you're gonna get this check every year just for saying, hey, I'm an American farmer. For a different method, Caroline Frank mentions in Agricultural Subsidies and the American Obesity Epidemic, different paths towards solutions. The easiest method is to take all the money already allocated to ag and divert it to produce. Farmers right now are penalized for growing specialty crops, such as fruits and vegetables, if they receive federal farm payments to grow other crops. Instead of decreasing subsidies, let's divert some of that funding to produce, like fruits and vegetables. This allows small farmers to compete, and it stops overproduction from happening. In Erwin Steltzer's article, U.S. Offer on Farm Subsidies Fall on Stony Ground, it talks about George H. Bush in 2005 suggesting to the EU to cut subsidies by 60% if the EU would cut theirs by 80%. Stopping the worry of outside markets coming into America, and if they didn't lower their subsidies, our prices would not, they'd be too high, and they would take over our market. When he proposed this, he received major backlash from those reliant across the country on subsidies, and the deal fell through. The solution to ag subsidies are currently optional, so we must first focus on lowering spending. Now that you understand the damage of ag subsidies, hopefully you support updating this corporate welfare program. Ag subsidies must be reduced and reformed, and if it is not, the U.S. could falter as a country. Ag subsidies impact many sectors of our lives and have a large impact on your day-to-day lives. Support those who desire change of ag subsidies. If not, you'll feel the repercussions. Stop letting big ag take advantage of the American people, and stop letting Washington act without consequences. If we start change now, our country can thrive with a more healthful and fair ag economy. Thank you for listening to my speech.